Yeah. So could you go through the approach, for impact players?
Oh, absolutely. So it's these 5 situations.
Yes.
And here's how they handle it. Some of them seem like very small differences, but they actually produce a big impact. So the first is when problems are messy and they're no one person's job. Most people do their job and they do it well. It was one of the things that struck me in the interviews. How many managers say, yeah, here's one of my typical contributors. They're awesome. They're so good at what they do. They do a great job, but they're not having big impact. And the people with impact, when the problems are messy, they don't just do their job. They do the job that needs to be done. It's not like they abandon their job, and it's not like they chase every wild problem. It's that they're willing to expand their range. Like, you know what, that's not my job, but it's not her job either. So let me go over to where there's something that's important, but it's broken or unattended. And I'm going to go kind of like throw myself over that. And they're drawn to these unattended problems.
And that's where the impact.
Leaders love them. Entrepreneurs love them because, once you've got an org chart and job descriptions, like that's a great capture of the past. But like, actually, if you're doing your job, you're probably handling yesterday's priorities. Like all the interesting and new and important stuff is in the white space between jobs. We haven't had time to codify that yet. And that's the space they work in. Like, it's not my job, but if it, and like, you ask for kind of practical things, like if I could suggest like one thing people can do in this part of it is, you know what? Find out what's important to your boss or your clients or your internal stakeholders. Find out what's important to them and make it important to you. And you will end up spending your time on different things. And if you really want to plus that, let people know, I understand what's important, and here's how I'm working on what's most important.
Yeah,
what executive doesn't want to hear that?
Because I was just about to say, right, I work with quite a lot of people, and always the ones who come with solutions, right? Because obviously, like, there's the job and there's the role and there's the current responsibilities, and obviously they have to be handled. But then there's the few who go, hey, I saw that thing over there and nobody like is doing anything with that. So if you want, I can do that. I was like, well, yeah, that's a problem I've got on my list to solve, and no one said anything. And so like all of a sudden, but they go up. Right now, again, they need to be the kind of person who's happy to take that on and perform at it, like, and be okay with the uncertainty and all that. But every leader loves that. I mean, who doesn't want to be told, hey, I can help, and here's what I do, and let me just do it. And it's like, okay, do you want any support? No, fine, yes or no, and it's great. It's great.
And there is a little bit like, we all say this, we see really busy, executive senior leaders, hey, how can I help? And they kind of like, I know when people ask me, I'm like,
I don't even know where to start.
I don't even know where to start because it's all in the white space. Like if it was that person's job, I would have already given it to them, or they would have figured that out. I'm like, it's all messy, messy work. And, I had a friend who was recently just struggling with a lot of personal things. And it was one of those things, hey, do you need any help? No. And then finally I just said, hey, I'm coming over and I'm doing this thing. And afterward, her husband said, I don't think we realized how much help we needed until you just like bossied your way over here and just did the job that needed to be done. And like, thank you, because I couldn't have figured out what we needed, but you just decided. And
so true.
Yeah. But as leaders, we can also just give people permission. Like, you know what, don't take your job description so seriously. Like, do what needs to be done. Okay. So that's the first. The second is when roles are unclear. Like we're collaborating, but we can't figure out who's in charge. Most people wait for role clarification. They wait for direction. Like somebody give me a racy or a rocky, or, like, okay, who's responsible? Who's accountable? Like they're looking for the powers that be to declare who's in charge. The impact players spot a leadership vacuum and they just step up and they fill it, which is interesting, but not really the nuance of what makes them so valuable. Is not that they're willing to step up and lead. It's that they're willing to step back when that leadership job is done. So, if anyone spent any time in the corporate world, it's like once you go into management, it's like your prize to keep for life. Like I'm a manager, I'm in management, and we hold on to these management jobs and titles. And the impact players had this much more fluid orientation to leadership, which is, hey, I'm willing to take the lead, but I don't need to always be the leader. Like I don't have to be in charge of everything. I'm as happy to follow someone who's a peer or who works for me on the org chart. And they practice this sort of like on-demand form of leadership. When a situation needs coverage, boom, I'm on it. But then when that job's done, let me step back so other people can take over. It's more like Canadian geese. Do they make it down to your part of the world?
Mm-mm.
Do you have any birds that fly in V formation when they migrate?
Oh yeah, I don't know what they are though. I don't have any idea about like any names.
But you've seen them in the
pigeons.
sky.
But I've seen them in the sky. Yeah, it's the V formations. Yeah.
And do you know why they fly in that V formation?
Is it like because of the wind or something? That's just me having full guess. I have no idea.
Drag. Yeah. And so we look up and we see them in the sky, but you don't see how it happens. So one of the birds, and I don't know how they do this, if it's pheromones or something, but one of the bird will fly to the front. They fly in that V, which they're breaking the wind, reduces the drag for the birds behind them. But then when they tire, they roll to the back and the next bird takes the lead. And so they rotate this leadership. And the scientists, I kind of nerded out into this one day. The scientists say they can fly 71% further than solo flight in this formation. Okay. So we have a lot of organizations where we got a bunch of leaders who are exhausted, and then we've got a bunch of people who are underutilized. Mm. And when we rotate this, and we normalize, like, you know what, take the lead in this project, but you're following someone else here. It distributes that workload and the organization doesn't suffer from burnout and exhaustion, because most of us like having a turn leading something.
It does sound like this is like kind of how you can be a leader who is a multiplier and support these impact players. And so they can have their, I guess, opportunity, to lead and to show the team that they can do this too. And then they can step back again, right? But it's like, just giving them the opportunity. That's also like very supportive of the organization's growth, right? And so just, it all connects, right? It's impact players, being a good leader that's a multiplier, it's all part of the same kind of pie.
It's all part of the same question that I'm like a dog on a bone with is, how do we create organizations where people are contributing at their fullest? Like deeply engaged, not like emotionally engaged in the rah-rah we do around that, but like intellectually engaged, locked on, working at their best. Not just so the company has access to all that resource, but we create environments where people are like, man, I'm doing big things. I'm having an impact. It's like the regenerative brakes on my car. It's like the more engaged we are, the more it creates energy back for us. So it also reduces this time. Like, I did this book, Rookie Smart, and I was looking at why we tend to be at our best when we don't know what we're doing, how it prompts all this learning mode. There was a role where there's a notable exception, which is when we're new to this role, we are disasters. And the role is manager. Like most people suck at this. Like first 6 months, it's a write-off. Like you don't want to be working for someone in their first management job. But when we have this more fluid model of leadership, like when people are now appointed into formal management roles, they're like, I got this. I know how to do this. I know how to like not have everyone in the team hate me. Like I understand like the concept of diminishing.
Yeah, what's interesting is like over the years I have worked with a few people that have gone from being an amazing producer to now being a department head or somebody who has to manage others. And the first thing I always hear is like, oh my God, it's all about people. Like I don't even do the work hardly anymore. And I was like, I know what a shift that is. And now you have to understand people. And I tell you, forget any technical stuff of any product, any service. People are way more complicated, right? It's literally the hardest thing, which is why it's the highest paid stuff in the world, right? Like the people who run companies get paid the most because they're having to run people, and to ensure an organization performs. And on an organization is people,
I know. And it's mind blowing. But like, I remember the day, Alex, that I figured this out. And it was like 7 p.m. lights are out in the building. People have gone home except me. And I'm like grumbling over my to-do list that got longer during the day because everyone's bringing their problems. And I'm like, why is everyone else home? And I'm still working and people aren't doing their jobs. I'm like, oh, maybe you aren't doing your job. Like
maybe it's me.
Maybe it's me. And maybe my job is to give other people work to do and then to keep it there so it doesn't all roll back to me. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I am not doing this job well. And then comes the real aha when I'm like, oh, it's not about me anymore. It's not about how much I can produce and my skills. It's how much production we get from the team and, innovation and such. And it's this outward orientation, which these multiplier leaders all had, this ability to get out of their own head and not into other people's heads, like mwahaha into their heads, but like, I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder what they can do that I haven't yet seen. I wonder, it's getting other people thinking. And here's the kicker is that's the same orientation I saw in these impact players is they aren't like self-obsessed. They're not even like around self-awareness. Their awareness is around other people. Wonder what pressures my boss is under. I wonder what success looks like for my client. Because you can't create value for others unless you understand what's valued. And so their awareness is all outside of themselves.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And, there's so many parts to unpack here, So impact players, is it true that impact players are more likely to become leaders in an organization? Like are the leaders in an organization often the impact players that have just stepped forward enough times that they now have opportunity to lead, like officially?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing I saw for certain in the evidence, and that is that organizations and leaders reinvest in impact players. Like we know who our impact players are, and we keep giving them more responsibility. They become our go-to people. Managers deputize them. And it's partly because of this performance guarantee, which is they always get it done. And they always get it done in the right way, meaning there's not blood on the floor. Like it's a Pyrrhic victory. Like I got it done, but don't talk to the 8 people who like suffered in this process. And so they naturally get tapped for leadership roles. They get moved into management. But so they, it's strange. Like there's some counterintuition here is because they tend to subordinate their will. They tend to subordinate their agenda, which is like, oh yeah, there's what I want to work on, but then there's the job that really needs to be done. And I'm going to be willing to do the job that's needed rather than what I personally am passionate about. They do that and they start to build influence, and pretty soon they get to set the agenda. So then like the organization just keeps pouring back into them, but it does take a couple different forms. Like the impact players that I looked at, some of them are kind of rising up the management ranks or very high in the management ranks, but others take that reinvestment and all that influence and cachet that they've built, and they don't use it to expand their influence, to rise in the organization. They use it to have more influence about how they work, where they work. Like, you know what, let somebody else climb the corporate ladder, but I want to work on this kind of work. And people are like, yeah, you can have anything you want because like, I trust you, you get it done in the right day. You're like my go-to gal on this. So, and some of them just gain bigger voice in the world and in the organization. They're the people that when they're the management meeting, everyone's like, okay, let's rally, let's bring our managers together and we're going to do this. Oh, and then these 3 people, they're not managers, but like they're the influencers in this organization. Like they are the leaders of this organization.
So I'm conscious of time. This conversation's gone so quick, and you've only talked about two of the parts. I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them. So that people should definitely purchase the book. But can because I have a couple more questions still. Can everybody like in an organization be an impact player? Is that possible, or is they? Because I would say that they would have ambition so that everybody would need to, because like they're impact players, right? So they seem to be more ambitious. Can they all be impact players, or is it just not like that?
Well, let me answer that from two angles. I'll try to be brief. Can you have an entire team of impact players? Let's answer that question. So here's what you can't really have is an entire team of MVPs, like most valuable players. You know, people tend to say, well, there's someone who's more valuable than everyone else, but can you have an entire team of impact players? Now, I chose that word on purpose because what an impact player does, to circle back to where we began, you know, and to perhaps like sort of see it for the first time, really, impact player is someone who is playing at their best, their fullest. They're making an enormously positive contribution, and they have a positive effect on the whole team. I'll take a whole team of those people, because you can have people having impact from all types of roles. And because you're not saying this one person is more valuable than anyone else, they're not the superstar of the team necessarily. Like, I actually believe with the right kind of thinking and reframing, you can have an entire team of impact players. Now, then there's a second question. And there's a whole like way to think about that. There's a chapter in the book on it. We don't have time for this, but the second question is, can everybody be an impact player? And I don't think the answer to that is yes. I think there are some of the mindsets that some people will struggle with and maybe don't want to get beyond. But I'm sort of a hopeful learner in that I've seen people learn to do some amazing things and let go of some mindsets and beliefs, but the only ones that are successful are the ones who have chosen that for themselves. Like you can't, like I've seen these raging diminishers become multiplier leaders, but I've never seen someone else turn them into a multiplier. I've only seen them turn themselves into it. So like if you're a manager, you can't like sprinkle lavender fairy dust on your people and say, okay, you know, we're going to hold
impact players.
Boom. You know, like read the book. Boom. Like, no, that's not going to happen. But here's the thing. I mean, it's very similar to how I felt about multipliers. Like that way of working is hard for some people, but once you get there, it is such a more rewarding way of working. It's worth that. Here's what I have learned studying the best leaders is actually what it's like to be on their team, and what it's like to be on a team led by a diminisher is that people come to work every day desperately wanting to contribute everything they have. Like, you know, when you're used at 50% of your capability, it's actually painful. It's exhausting, strangely, to be under.
For me. Oh my goodness. I have to do something else. I'm like, yeah, nah, this is not I'm like bored.
I'm like, I need hobbies.
I need something to do. Yeah.
It's like we are built for challenge and we're actually built for change and growth. And, you know, what I've learned is that people don't want to be job holders. Like people want meaning and impact, and people want to contribute everything they have and know that it's making a difference.
What impact players do. This is the thing I've noticed. This is what impact players want.
Everyone wants it. So this is
one. Sure that everyone wants it? I guess they do, right?
I am sure about this. Like this is probably, if you had to say, Liz, what's the one thing you know? Everything else I'm suspicious about. This thing I know. People want to contribute. Now, there are plenty who have learned not to.
Okay. I mean, who wouldn't want to contribute, right?
Who wouldn't
want to have an awesome job where they're doing the best of that they can and getting paid well for it and having a positive contribution in the world
and doing meaningful work, like everyone. And I have been looking at this in different cultures and different industries. Everyone wants it. Now, there are some people who've been working for diminishers so long, they're like, I'm not even like innovative thinking, not at all. Doing anything more than I'm asked, dangerous. So some people have learned not to. But I don't know someone who doesn't want it. And if given a safe environment, wouldn't try, because you don't have to actually work more hours. It's about working in different ways that create more impact for the time you spend. And I think everyone wants that. I mean, no one wants like to have no life because their job has consumed them and eaten them up. But, and so like, I actually think it's possible to have a team of people who are playing at their very best and having really deep, meaningful impact in their work.
Yeah, I think that's a super point, So again, if we look at the conversation that we've had today, start with vision. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, right? And so you want to be a multiplier and to really to inspire and to encourage your
collective vision.
To do a collective vision, right? And to kind of include them in the process, include them in the journey. Now, ideally, you have impact players, and if you can identify them now because of the conversation that we had through the book, and you're like a multiplier leader, now you can start to identify the areas where you can really start to get the most out of your team. And for the team, and just for the people who are on the team, this is kind of how you can become an impact player, to take that extra step, right? And the goal out of all this is to create a successful work environment, a successful organization that has a massive impact on the world, that is above and beyond the competition, right? Just from the same kind of effort, right? And one question, right? This is the one question which I always have, right? Because they say it's not the best person who wins a championship, it's the best team, right? Can everybody be the best team? Or like, is there always now going to be one team that's better than another, and if so, what is the difference between the team that is the championship team and, the one who came second or third, right? Because that's still good,
Yeah. So let me offer a thought that probably is going to be unpopular with a lot of people. It was unpopular with my kids. I'm the kind of, I've got 4 kids. I'm the kind of mom who goes to the sports events and not only cheers for our team, I kind of cheer for the other team. And they're like, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, well, that was a good play. Like, that was an amazing catch. And they're like, yeah, but they're our opponent. I'm like, yeah, but it was amazing. So I'm not rooting for them. I'm just acknowledging good play. I think there is a bit of reframing that we can be done. Like, particularly as we're starting companies and entrepreneurial and high growth, is redefining what it means to win. So you can choose to say winning is about like suffocating your competition or like beating the competition and being in number one. And that, I guess, it doesn't hurt, but I think it's an incomplete definition of winning. Like, if you want a team of impact players, like, include in your definition is like, we win when we have played at our best. Like, when we have done everything we possibly could, and not only did an individual do their best thinking and best work, the entire team did, that's a win. And I think there's lots of evidence in sports and in business that when managers coach for that mindset and behavior, teams win in the marketplace. But it's saying like the point of the arrow is our best work, like our very, very best, and make maybe that your primary definition, and then keep your scoreboard of actually, W's and L's. Like, I think it helps create this high contribution environment.
Yeah.
But some people are like, oh, no, losses are not wins.
Well, it's persistence, right? Like, in the face of that, right? And so you try your best, maybe you don't win a competition, or something, right? A pitch, a client, like a thing or whatever. But then you try again and you try again and you try your best every single time. And, through consistency, through the right environment, through the right team, and through the right plays. But, we didn't even get to speak about smart plays, unfortunately, today. So the people will have to listen to the book. I mean, to read or listen to the book at the time that it comes out. But, there's how to run an organization. I think there's a lot of organizations that are not like this, right? So I think like, even if you were starting to do just a fraction of the things that we speak about, like in the podcast for today, like you'll be way ahead of a lot of companies out there. I mean, I've seen a lot of companies and they're all over the place, right? So, just to be thinking.
Add it to your thinking. It's not about, losses are okay. It's like, your job as a leader is to extract people's best thinking and best work. And to create an environment where they can do that. And that leads to wins. It does. But if you put that as your primary goal and the win-loss, move that a little bit into a secondary position, you're gonna win. You're still gonna win.